Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the podcast where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, Rebecca Ikes-Kara. Welcome back, my friends. A heads up before I forget. For those listening to our little slice of the podcast world in real time as each episode airs, for one, thank you. Bravo. I can't even keep up with podcasts that I like to listen to like that. So that's amazing and thank you. But also, naturally, given we're speeding our way towards Christmas and New Year's, I'll be taking a little mini break these next 2 weeks for the holidays. Granted, I'll be photographing a wedding on New Year's Eve, so it's not really a full-fledged break, but you know what I mean. There won't be any new podcast episodes for 2 weeks after this one. But I will say, if you aren't on our email newsletter list, you're going to want to stop what you're doing right now and send me a DM at the Maker's Playbook over on Instagram, or go to makers-playbook.com/newsletter to get on that list, because you are definitely not going to want to miss out on what we have lined up for the new year. We'll be kicking off 2022 in a big way. Let me just say, without ruining all of the surprises, hypothetically speaking, if you wanted a little insight into how some potters have become insta-famous, the start of 22 is going to be your jam. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. So just sign up to be alerted of that new episode at makers-playbook.com/newsletter, or just DM me your email address at the Maker's Playbook on Instagram. All right. Today I've got a great conversation with Kisha of Peaks Candles. Now, we did record this one quite a while ago, and she's been going through some rebranding. So while I say a completely different Instagram handle during the interview, you can find Kisha on Instagram at Peaks Candles, not Peking, like I say. But regardless of that, and we're just going to ignore the abrupt ending that you're going to come to at the end of this episode due to my technological failings, which has been keeping me from even sharing this conversation for far too long. It is an insightful chat, despite those things, about the benefit of quietly launching a business and how having a lot of various life experiences in all different realms and reasons can actually help us be stronger business owners. Let's dig in. Hey, Kisha, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here, and I mean, this is the wonders of the internet, right? Being like introduced from a mutual friend, connecting.
Yeah.
We were both in Chicago, and yet instead I'm staring at you on Zoom. Why not?
It's the new norm.
It is.
What we have.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Well, and the sound quality would not be any good if we were sitting out in a park anyway, so. Oh,
but how wonderful it would be.
Right?
But you're right. You're right.
We'll do that again later. Sorry, everybody, you won't be there for us. Well, Kisha, for people who don't know you, how do you introduce yourself when you're, first time somebody's meeting you?
Ooh, that's always tricky. It really just, for real, I struggle with that, but it really just depends on the space, I guess. So here, I'm a creative of all things, primarily with a passion for storytelling. So I use that to create for the most part. And then in lieu of 2020, I've really focused on self-care practices. So that's where the business part of myself has started to come from.
And I was introduced to you through your business Instagram, which is Peking Candles. But that's not the only... We've got multiple arms here going on, like any...
Yeah.
I mean, that's the creative lifestyle, isn't it?
Yeah. So Peking actually started just as a transparent story platform. So I was blogging. I was like, okay, I'm just going to share what I'm going through. So in 2017, it was literally like the worst year of my life, right? Mm-hmm. But I was working for a very prominent brand. I was working for Samsung. I was traveling a lot. So people were looking at my Instagram and I would get so many DMs, or some of my friends text me like, "Ooh, I want your life." And I'm like, "No, you don't. You really don't." No. So I started to have conversations with people about actual things that I was going through, and they were surprised, but then they also would share things with me. And I'm like, it's so many people that are like suffering silently when I'm not saying your friend will cure you, but at the same time, knowing that you're not the only one going through something is helpful. So that's where the blog stemmed from. And then I was very much so like, I don't know every story. I don't go through every situation. Let me invite people into that. So I had a lot of guest bloggers on as well. And then 2020. So initially, what I wanted to do was the blog would transition to a podcast. But I've always been very much so into smells, not realizing that it does impact your mood. I just felt like I just had a low-key fear of smelling. So I needed to, so I need to make sure every space smelled good. But really, it just impacted my mood. So I was like, when I invite people in to have these difficult conversations, I want a certain scent to be in the space to help them feel comfortable. 2020 happened. We couldn't be in spaces anymore, but I had already started playing with the idea of making candles, and I had been making them for like a year, trying to perfect a scent. And after being laid off, I had nothing but time to really devote into my candles. So I was like, let me keep working at this chemistry of it all. And it was a bit nerve-wracking, and I was really terrified to put it out. But when I did, it did very well. And when I launched, I sold out of my first bulk in 6 days.
That's amazing. And when did you launch?
I launched in August, like mid-August of 2020.
I was going to say like less than a year ago.
Less than a year ago. Yeah. And I sold out 3 times in 2020, which is crazy.
You didn't have an audience. You had your followers personally from the
blogging.
Samsung lifestyle, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that audience transitioned naturally where a lot of those selling outs were because you had started this blog and kind of...
Honestly, I don't think they connected at all. Which is weird, which is crazy because I was very much so open about how aromatherapy was important and the things that I had learned about it. Maybe 1% of those followers buy candles for me. No, maybe like 10%. And I didn't post it as much on my personal page just out of being nervous of sharing. So a lot of it happened with like word of mouth. My first event, I decided to launch at a vendor marketplace. So it's kind of low key. And I just went like, okay, let me test this out and see how it goes. And it was a 3-hour event. For the first 2 hours, nobody bought anything from me. They would come smell it. They'd be like, oh, I can smell your candles from all the way over there. And then they walk away, child.
And that's it.
They didn't buy nothing. And then the last hour, it was like a flood.
It's amazing.
The last hour is crazy.
Just boom. Yeah. There's so many interesting things because you intentionally launched without making a big to-do about it because you could kind of, to me, it's sounding like you could safely like, well, let me just try this. Because if you don't make a big to-do about it, you have that safety net of like thousands of people aren't staring at you.
Yep.
Which, like, how many people are going to get it right the first go? I mean, if you've never done this before, come on.
Absolutely. Right. In hindsight, and if it was somebody else that I knew launching something, I would have been like, just do it. It doesn't matter. Pub it. It'll do greater things. Right. But when it's you, it's a little different. And your mind starts to play with all of the things that can go wrong, not the things that could go right. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to be real low key with this just in case.
Right. We need to sit there for a minute, right? Because what is that about? And I'm sure there's psychological studies of why this is, right? It's like our lizard brains protecting us from, I don't know, some dinosaurs or whatever it was.
Right. From whatever our mind makes up that'll happen if we fail at something. Because truthfully, the only thing that failure does is teaches you. Right. It teaches you what to do right the next time. But it's a major fear around people knowing that something didn't go right and things won't go right. That's not life. Things do not go right.
And also the outside audience might not know that it didn't go right. Right. Like you have one vision. They experience something else to you that didn't go right. To them, that's all they know. They don't know.
That's a good point.
The candle still smells good. So there it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. I guess imposter syndrome is a real thing. It is a real thing. And we talk ourselves out of so much because truthfully, even though I had success, it probably could have been bigger. If I wasn't so scared of what it would look like on the outside, it probably could have done even more.
Well, and from what I'm hearing, the only reason the launch happened is because you got laid off.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I mean, was there a plan when you were still traditionally employed to like make this entrepreneurial leap? at all?
Maybe in the future. I feel like I've always had an entrepreneur kind of mindset, but I've never really looked at the entrepreneur lifestyle as like a glamorous lifestyle. I understood the work that has to go into it. And
let's repeat that.
Look,
lack of glamour. There is very little glamour in the entrepreneurial life.
Right? Like, because some people make it look real good, but like we don't know what happened 10 years prior to what we see right now. Mm-hmm. And I just knew the amount of work. If you think about the amount of work that you have to put in for somebody else's company when you have a job, when it's yours, I was already like, okay, I don't know where that time and resources gonna come from. I'm still recovering from college days of eating noodles every day. So I was like,
I don't want to go back to that.
I'm not signing up for that right now. But sometimes the universe just push you in certain directions. Yeah. And by the grace of God, I was just able to float on through it.
All right. So that launch was in August. Mm-hmm. You said you've sold out now a couple of times.
Yeah.
In the spirit of transparency, what has that actually looked like in terms of are we talking like 20 candles? Are we talking 200 candles? Are we talking like...
Yeah. So the first round, when I sold out in 6 days, that was like 250 candles. And I don't even know how many wax melts. Yeah, 6 days. Like, it was crazy. And then after that, I wasn't able to keep up with myself. So I would I would have like 50 or so and then sell out. So I've sold out like 3 times and then like another 50 and sell out. And so this was by the end of 2020. So in 21, I've been kind of playing it a little differently because my primary focus has been rebranding. So August to December, I'm like, okay, I see what this can do. I see some things I probably need to prepare better for. I see what people are wanting. I'm asking people different questions and surveying them. So right now I'm in the process of just rebranding, and then people have just been placing orders. So I haven't had them as of now to just purchase through the site. But if someone reaches out to me, like I need a bulk of candles, then I'll make that happen. So I just did like an order of 10 candles last month, and I'm doing an order of 40 right now.
Got it. Mm-hmm. So kind of the pre-order model where it's kind of, then that way you at least know the quantity you're going for and you're done.
Right. While I'm rebranding. Because there's some things, the beautiful thing about the launch and it doing so well was that it taught me the stuff that I need to do a little differently. And most people can continue the business going and make those changes. That's not a strategy that worked for me.
Sure.
I felt like I couldn't really keep up with the things that I wanted to see done and the things that I needed to get done. So I just needed to pause.
That's actually a really interesting process, timeline, whatever. I don't know what the right word is, but you're right. Most of us have these incremental growths, which in some ways probably slows us down when I think about it, because you're trying to rebrand your old brand's attracting one audience, but that's not the audience you want. And so that slows down growth financially also because you're not attracting the crowd that you want.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's safer because it's incremental. So you're not making some big scary change, wondering if it's going to work or not. But yeah, I think you're onto something. I'm kind of like, oh.
I don't know. But even to your point, when it comes to cost, like just rebranding and needing new labels, and I'm designing new labels. When people place more orders, I have to print more of the old labels to get that out while I'm also working on the new labels. So it was, for me, it wasn't working. Some people can do it and do it very well, but I was like, I needed to take a step back and just work on the rebrand until it's right enough for me.
I like that you said right enough. Not that you didn't say perfect. You didn't say done. You just said right enough.
Yeah. Because perfection, this quote that I love so much, perfection is the enemy of progress. Because something will never be perfect to you, or not for me. Perfection it always changes. Yep. Your idea, you can get a layout today, a design today, and it looks great. Next week, you'd be like, actually, and you can stay in that revamping phase forever.
Yes. Not to mention your goals change. I saw somebody share today, and I love this quote that was basically like, remind yourself that where you are right now was once the dream.
It was a goal.
Right, exactly. And our goals are constantly, if you're doing it right, your goals are constantly changing and growing in some ways. And so you've got to appreciate that, like, while it feels like right now, okay, I wish I had this large of an audience, or I wish I had this much revenue, or here's where I want to be in 5 years, blah, blah, blah. Those are things that are important, obviously,
Yeah.
but like
giving your space the time, the opportunity to pivot, because you will. We are ever changing. Just as human beings, we're always going to change.
Indeed.
That's good.
Right, because like I have to remind myself of that all the time. 11 years ago when I first started my photography business, all I wanted to do was stop having to work part-time jobs, you know, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make people coffee. Like being able to quit that job was success, right? Yeah. Being able to like pay the bills with just the business was, holy cow, I can live in a place like Chicago and be self-employed and make it work. That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Guess how quickly I forgot that was amazing. Like what, 6 months after I quit the job, probably? Right.
It's because then you have different needs. It's like, okay, now I'm paying the bills, but now I want to go on a vacation and now I want new equipment or, you know.
Right. I want to be published. I want somebody so-and-so to recognize me, or I want to work with this company, or I want to do that. Yeah. Okay. So you're still in the middle of rebranding right now and kind of doing the wholesale orders as they're coming in, which also means that like you've got a strong enough presence that people are still asking even without, you know, pushing out shop updates and things.
Yeah, I've been very blessed in that regard where some people, I have regular customers, and thankfully some of my clients always order in bulk. So one of them specifically, my church, they love to burn candles, and one of my pastors that's like, it's like 10 at a time, between 5 or 10. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Isn't it always so exciting, I think, to see how, I think we all somewhere deep down know we have a community around us that supports us, but then when like financially you get that support from somebody like that, like that's gotta feel awesome.
No, it's amazing, especially in the time where, so I've been working since I was 13. Not working hasn't really been a thing for me. So in 2022, and I've never been fired, okay? I ended the relationship with the job, okay? So to be laid off in COVID was like, that shook me up for a little bit. I didn't really know what would happen or how I was going to get any type of income or anything. So it was nice to start something, but then have the support where people like, they support me, but they also genuinely like what I produced. So it gave a whole level of confidence to it and what I'm able to do and what my capabilities are, and relying on that.
Well, yeah, you don't get reorders unless somebody also likes the product.
Right.
I'll throw a friend a one-off like, oh, okay, you're doing a thing. I'll like buy the one thing. But if you don't keep buying the thing unless you love it.
Right. When you come back, now we on to something.
I would so appreciate your transparency. So digging a little deep into some of the harder stuff, maybe, and it's hard to say in hindsight, I'm sure, but what was that transition like around the, you know, having to come to terms with the layoff? And okay, I totally hear you in terms of having never not had a job before. That's no small mental battle.
Not.
So then to also be launching a business at the same time, which is its own mental battle unto itself.
Right.
I don't know how you did this.
So I actually wasn't in the process of launching a business the time I got laid off. The only thing that I had was a blog, and I hadn't really figured out how to make that lucrative. I was just like, I'm going to push these stories until I figure out where this to go. And then getting laid off, first off, I did go through a dark period. Thankfully, it wasn't anything that lasted an extreme amount of time, but I definitely had some rough days. But I'm also very connected spiritually. Like I have a relationship with God, is what I like to say. So I had some very transparent prayers, which is interesting. It was very different from anything that I have done before, but that became my source of strength. It didn't necessarily make it easier, but it made me, I guess, a little less depressed in it. And then it made me really realize what I had. So what I had at that time was a bunch of wax and oils that I had just been experimenting with. And I had this experience that was new to me in a blog that I had decided to be transparent through. So I first decided to share that story through this transparent blog, because that's why we did.
Yeah.
And then I had this wax and oil and plenty of time. So I just started making them, and then I would give some samples out to like my sisters or some really close friends, and then they were like, "Oh, I like this candle. I like this scent." So I was like, "Well, let me make a couple more and see what the other people say."
Yeah.
And then I ended up being on a call for entrepreneurs. It's crazy how things just line up too. I don't even know why I was on that call. It was a bunch of entrepreneurs talking about their businesses and how they got started. And somebody ended up asking me what I was doing. And I'm like, well, I have a blog and I just started making some candles. Maybe I can just talk about these candles as a business. That's what really planted the seed.
Yeah.
And it just grew from there.
I don't even know where to start. Okay, the call first, I think. Are we talking like a Clubhouse thing? Or are we like you were on a private phone call with a group of entrepreneurs? You just happened to find yourself?
This was before Clubhouse. So actually, I skipped the steps. So what's even crazier is the day I was laid off, I had a phone call for an interview. Now, I thought this was a paid opportunity, right? So I'm like, it's fine. You let me go, but I got an interview right after this. It wasn't a paid opportunity. It was volunteer, but it happened.
I wish everybody could have seen your eyes just then, like,
I was like, oh, it's not, money.
No. I'm actually past that phase of my life. Thank you.
Exactly. Oddly enough, I ended up praying about that opportunity. And for some reason, I felt led to help this woman. Right. So I did. And it was in a realm.
It's a lucky woman.
Right. And it was a realm. I'm like, okay, this is stuff that I want to learn. So let me just learn for free. But she happened to be an entrepreneur. So it's a whole platform of her teaching women to grow 6-figure businesses. Which is not what attracted me to her page initially, but coincidentally, that's what it was. And I had taken producing a podcasting class like 2 years prior to, never used anything I learned in that class. So a couple months after meeting her, because of COVID, she like, I got to change some things. I want to do a podcast. You know anything about podcasting? I'm like, actually, I do. And and then that evolved. So I think that's what kind of initially opened my brain to entrepreneurship. And then the call that I was on, I had a friend that is my friend group has changed a lot too in COVID, where almost everybody are entrepreneurs. And they were on this call and I was looking for a mentor, just a life mentor, really. And it was through the church. So I decided to hop on that call and it was just all about entrepreneurship. And I was like, this is great. I was kind of just looking for a mentor, but it's cool. It just really ended up planting more seeds of entrepreneurship in me, really.
Yeah.
Fast forward to a year after COVID, right after the layoff. I was laid off March 19th. I remember the day. And I'm now being paid to produce the podcast. I'm still making money from the candle business. And then I also have a job. So I went from no income to 3 streams in a year.
Oh my gosh. Tell me though, the impetus, like you're back to having a traditional job?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know where to go with that. It's just a point I wanted to make because it doesn't always necessarily, like all of this is in flow and flux. Just because you've launched a business, you are a business owner, you are a entrepreneur, that doesn't mean you can't also be like, okay, well, this fits in here. So I'm going to take this other stream of revenue from a traditional employment, but you're still rebranding your business. You still like, I'm guessing by the presence you bring to this phone call, like you've got goals and vision for what peaking or maybe the name's changing. I don't know, like where that's going now. So where does the new traditional job fit into the scheme for you?
Even that is so interesting. One, I don't remember applying to the job. I hope anybody that hears this interview that hears this episode that I work with, don't take offense. I don't remember applying to the job. What's interesting though, is that it is a startup company. So in the process of me pausing the business to rebrand, I'm like, it's so much business wise that I do want to implement in this rebranding. And then I end up getting hired for a company. And when I tell you the interview process was like interview Tuesday, offer by Saturday, the process was so quick. And it's a very new company where the Chicago market hasn't even been launched yet, or it just launched this past week. So in this, I'm really learning how business owners on another level operate.
Smart.
How they're going about launching something, how they're gaining partnerships, how they're scaling a business. So to me, and again, because I'm so connected to God, I'm like, it's no coincidence that I'm rebranding, don't remember applying for this job, and the wealth of knowledge that I'm getting in this process.
And getting paid for it.
And
let's just be clear.
They're paying me pretty well.
Okay, so I'm just going to pause all my plans for life and have you tell me how I should approach this, because you're knocking it out of the park right now.
But you know what? It don't always feel that way, honestly. Like you said, where you have one goal and then you achieve it and you just on to the next. And I actually need to do better at resting in what I have and being more appreciative. Because it's always this go, go, go. Like, okay, got one thing, got to get the next. And one, I never want to act like I am just deserving of everything just because I am. I want to be grateful and appreciate the things that I am able to have and achieve, because I know what it feels like on the opposite side of that, right? So I don't know. I actually need to do better at resting in the moment while also having goals.
All the rest of us, you and all the rest of us, I think the first step, at least right now, is like, we're at least talking about it.
Yeah.
We've got the words to put to rest and gratitude and appreciation and slowness and stillness, but I don't know.
Yeah. It's tough sometimes. And I'm like, Lord, I want to be wealthy by 40. So time is ticking. I need 7 streams. But really, I mean, I'm healthy. I'm in a different place. Mentally, I'm well. We all could do better at just appreciating the smaller things and even the greater things that we're fortunate enough to achieve.
Well, and also letting time do its work, I think, a little bit, right? I know that there's the financial school thought around like wealth accrual and the whole 7 streams of income thing, but you've already got 3.
Yeah.
And who knows where, like, your whole story so far has been such one of synchronicity and, like, happy accidents. And
yeah,
I don't know how this came about, but now all these things are lining up. And so, at least from my own experience, some of the times when I start to have a goal that I try and kind of shove through, the timing was wrong. And it's not going to work because the timing was wrong.
Yeah. What I realized, too, with you saying that made me think, sometimes when we're ready for something, we're not really ready for it. Like, we want it in the moment, but if we get it, we wouldn't be able to nurture it in the way that we need to for it to grow. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
Absolutely.
When you feel like you want something, you always feel like you're ready. But being in it is a little different. The journey of entrepreneurship is not, well, I ain't never feel really ready for that, but it's definitely not an easy one. The amount of sacrifice that goes with something that you want as well is something that people don't talk about. Yes, the producing a podcast is a string for me now, but I worked for her for 10 months for free. Like, that was like, I just kind of sold into her business, and that ended up blessing me and mine, which is a sacrifice, because that was a lot of time. Well,
and how long ago did you start the blog in the first place?
So my personal blog started in 2018. That's when I first launched my blog.
So that was also nurturing you as a storyteller, you as just being comfortable online and sharing. I have no doubt that I'm sure the lessons from that applied to how you were able to kickstart selling candles so quickly.
That is such a great point. Because I haven't even thought about that. I kind of just dismissed the whole blog aspect. I never really considered myself a writer. So that was me challenging myself, one, and then just beginning the journey of storytelling, which was a huge challenge for me. But that's crazy because I didn't even put those two together, but that's very true.
Which is hilarious because when we first started talking before we hit record, you specifically said how the business is part storytelling and part just a product of candles.
Yeah. But the whole fact of like the blogging, I guess because I've moved away from blogging, like I know that's where I started, but I didn't even really consider it the thing that brought about the things that I'm doing, which is crazy. Because obviously, but so much revelation in this.
And I'm just sitting with it to where I'm like, I didn't have a follow-up question, actually. What, over this last year, what is something that you feel like I was going to ask you what has surprised you, but I feel like all of it has been a surprise from the way that you've been talking.
Non-stop surprises, like for real. I have a week of things like, how?
That's amazing. Well, is there something that you feel like had the layoff not happened, had something that obviously on the outside is painful or difficult or negative, something that maybe you would have never done or never, I mean, you started the blog a few years ago, but with having that security of traditional employment, I mean, it's hard to say whether or not any of this would come about, I realize, but.
Right. I think ultimately it would have. I don't know if it would have come in 2020. I don't know if I would have had the experiences that I've been able to have if I hadn't been laid off. Because even with me starting the blog while I was working, it was very slow moving because I was working. Once I had the gift of time that I didn't recognize as a gift, I used it. Yeah.
Going back to talking about like taking a pause on the business to rebrand, because that if you would have kept producing and trying to rebrand at the time, that's so many things happening at once. But now I'm kind of laughing to myself because you're producing a podcast for someone else, having a new job, and also still rebranding and starting your business. So how's that going?
Yeah. So one thing, having the gift of time also taught me how to have boundaries with it and taught me what was important, right? I know ultimately, and if anybody from my job is listening to this, the ultimate goal isn't for me to keep working for someone the rest of my life. That's just not what that is.
Doesn't mean you're not grateful currently and fully committed.
Right. Absolutely. You ain't gonna be able to complain about me and the job that I do, but I do have ultimate goals. So with that too, I've set boundaries. So I get up in the morning to feed myself because I need to mentally, what I realized too, if I'm not mentally in a good place, I'm not going to be able to produce anything. So I realize the things that I need to help me get through the day. So I wake up early enough to feed myself first. And then I'll work and do my work. And sometimes it can be hard depending on the industry of having set cutoffs because some jobs just aren't traditionally 8 hours a day. But I've also been very vocal in this new role, more so than I have been in any role before. Like, I can work efficiently, but these are the windows that I have. And if I give you X amount on this day, I need to scale back on this day because I'm not just going to work and coming home and going to sleep. There are still things that I'm producing and that I still need to hold myself accountable to. So with working again now, I have more boundaries and I hold myself accountable. A lot of my goals are tailored around the things that I still want to accomplish in my own businesses. One of my mentors explained to me the other day that the job is just the river that I'm taking to get to the next thing. It's a resource. So that's what I'm using it for. It is definitely teaching me a lot. It is helping me afford some things that I am pouring into my own business, but it's not the end goal.
Well, talking about it as a resource to pour into your own business, it's almost like the smartest way of financing your own business, right? Like some people take startup capital, some people take out loans, some people work jobs at the same time or what have you. Like it's the best zero interest loan.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And for some people, it might not work. I think different strokes, different folks, right? Some people just need the loan. They take off running and boom. Most of these business loans, you have 10 years or 20 years to pay back. So they're fine with that. For me, though, the type of creative that I realized I was as well, I need to be able to pull away from some things to help feed me creatively. So I want to be able to go on some trips. I want to be able to go to a dinner and not have to, count the change. And that's just something that helps me and where I am. So because I am that person, I needed to set those boundaries like, you're devoting X amount of time to this, and then you're going to do this. I'm very disciplined. Yeah.
I love that. That is when I talk to somebody who's like, no, I don't have a schedule. I just kind of go with the flow. I'm like, no. How do you get anything done? I don't understand.
Right.
Like, if I go with the flow, the alarm goes off, I stay in bed. Like, that's going with the flow.
Right.
Like, curling up with the dog is very cozy. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that because I also think it's just a very realistic, like, especially when you're balancing another employment along with goals of your own business. It's just what you have to get stuff done.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Also, grace is something you need to have. And that's something that I'm learning. Grace for myself. that it's okay if I don't complete my whole Thursday list on Thursday. Right. But at least I got something done in that day, because also sleep is important. I'm not one of those people that's like, I'm asleep when I die. No, I need my rest.
Well, especially being a creative. How are you percolating new thoughts without prep or rest?
Exactly. So because of that too, my phone goes on do not disturb at 10 o'clock. Now, whether or not I still need to check it, I'll check it if I want to, but it also prevents me from just being on it consistently. So at 10 o'clock, I mean, if I'm not looking, I'm not going to hear from you.
Yep.
You won't hear from me.
I love that. Mine is from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. because that's my like goal for just good sleep.
Yeah.
But also then when you do that with like its sleep schedule, it reminds you at like 9 or 9:15 and I go, ooh, okay, I need to finish this up. I'm going to get off.
Yeah.
1,000%. 1,000%.
It's a lot. And it's one thing I forgot to mention too that happened in 2020 creatively is I was able to produce my own commercial for a client, which was crazy. So some of the stuff that I do, I sow a lot of my time into things, but I also get something in return. Mm-hmm. I do a lot of camera operating as well. All storytelling.
Which, okay, that through line makes sense to me, but that's a whole different set of skills. And I'm like, okay, hold on. First, we need to just do a rundown, apparently, of your like skills abilities. That would be helpful.
My creative resume.
Right.
But yeah, I do a little hosting as well. So I get a lot of my resources from church, actually. I go to a relatively large church, and I used to study theater and acting for a really, really long time. And when I started working for Samsung, because I was traveling 99% of the time, I was like, how can I still tap into storytelling without being committed to a place all the time? So anytime I came back home, I would serve at church and just be a camera operator. And then again, fast forward to COVID, I started serving on that team in 2016, but it was minimal, right? 2020, I have a lot of time in the world, and they couldn't switch up their people because of COVID. So it's like, hey, if you decide to do this, we need you here for everything. Cool, I got the time. So my skill set in camera operating grew tremendously. And I went from working a camera on a tripod to doing handheld and now operating a gimbal and then directing and TDing. So the evolution of that, it's just all things storytelling.
Right.
That's been happening. And that also allowed me an opportunity to gain a client and produce some content for them.
I feel like this is a beautiful example of just how multi-skilled in some way. I don't want to say entrepreneurs are required to be, because I am sure there is a story out there, someone who is an expert in one skill and one skill specifically, and that's what their business is. But in the creative field, in the arts, I'm just making this assumption based upon your story and my story, and that's it. But you have to be so nimble and versatile and willing to also learn all these new skills and how they're all going to feed into themselves. Like, I'm just imagining now the marketing capabilities you're going to be able to have for your own business because you're comfortable with a camera.
Yeah. More than that, though, I think I love what you said about us just having different skills. I think that was probably the thing that held me back for so long. It's not appreciating the fact that I'm multifaceted. Like, there isn't just, like, I don't have to just do one thing. I don't have to just be a candle maker. I don't have to just be an operations professional. Like, there's so many skills that I do have that I can do very well. Now, I do think you need to choose what you want to go after first. Like, my mentor has this 90-91 rule. For 90 days, you focus on one thing for 90 minutes. And that allow you to flush a lot out too, and at least have something going before you start the next thing. Thankfully, a lot of mine is just in the realm of storytelling, and now I have a product-based business. But for the most part, they're in the same vein.
Well, and to sell those products, you got to tell a story. I mean, why should I buy your candle over the one that's half the price at Target or whatever?
Exactly. Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
And people are clearly buying your candles. Yeah. So.
Yes.
Well, and I love what you mentioned about that 90-91 rule. I also have had a coach myself who has used the same thing. And it's hard when you're multi-passionate. It's hard when you've got all these other interests and you see the value in those interests and what they're bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
But the metaphor that he used was, imagine that you're trying to push one rock up a hill. You're focused on this one rock, pushing it up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
You can get it to the top. You'll be tired by the end, but you can get it up there. Now imagine there's a bucket full of pebbles being poured down a hill, and you're supposed to try and get all those pebbles up the hill. It's not that heavy, but there's no way you can keep all of your hands. You know, you're moving your hands from one spot to the next so quickly that you don't make any traction whatsoever. You don't even get 6 inches up the hill because there's no way you can put all your attention in that many places.
Yeah. I love that analogy. That's great.
It has changed the way I work.
Yeah.
Completely, because I started my photography business 11 years ago. People are probably getting tired of hearing me say that. But we started another brand. We started a secondary brand for it about 5-6 years ago. And so all of a sudden now, like, I was thinking, oh, we're just doing twice as much of the same work. But no, it was radically different. To try and have a team or something like that is a whole different business model than what I was doing before. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm pulled into 2 separate places, right? And those first couple of years, until we really figured it out, I realized at the end of the first year, like, I didn't make any traction at all on most of what I wanted to do. And I was like, how is that happening? Because I'm working my butt off, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the point.
And it's interesting that your mentor also mentioned, has and I'm guessing maybe they know this, there's a lot of studies based just around like how long us as humans can focus on something, and that 90-day, the quarterly rhythm, if you will, of the year. For one, it's a very natural life cycle anyways, obviously, like the seasons happen the way they do for a reason.
Yep.
Sometimes in Chicago.
Right. It can look different.
It snowed last week. It's 80 degrees today. Whatever. But like that natural rhythm, but then also I heard somebody say, and I don't remember who, so I can't give it the right credit, but that's basically the farthest out we as humans can envision, right? Like it's important to have a 1-year goal or a 5-year goal, but we can't really like
plan it.
Process that far out. So
yeah, that's a good point. I haven't heard that before, but it makes sense.
Well, so how are you with all these moving pieces then? How are you kind of doing that 90-91?
Well, all of these have kind of already been in motion for a little bit.
Okay.
One thing that has been common in my journey that I didn't realize until this moment was that I've been either studying it or have studied and put it to the side. So like the podcasting, when I took the class, I didn't know what I would use it for. I was just curious about it. It's a form of storytelling. I didn't end up utilizing what I learned until 2 years after. And I didn't take it like, oh, I got to jump on this right now. I had a podcast idea and concept, but I trusted the timing of it all. Consciously or unconsciously, I trusted the timing of it all. When it came down to me being a camera operator, I didn't necessarily know what I would use that for, but I knew it was something that I wanted to learn. 4 years later, I ended up being more advanced in it. When it came down to making candles, I knew that I wanted them. I didn't know that it would form into a business. A year and a half later, it's a business. So nothing really happened for me immediately with me learning it or studying it. It had its time. It had a lot of time to marinate first, and then it became a thing. So now I'm in the process of figuring out how to keep feeding it and growing it, because the learning has already taken place, and it already started.
That's so good.
You gotta love an awkward ending thanks to technological glitches. But honestly, if I had to pick a spot, that's still a pretty darn good way to end episode 208 here on the podcast. It's amazing how our life experiences, no matter how seemingly random or disparate, can fuse together and make the unique mixture of skill sets and knowledge that we need for our own unique approaches to small business and entrepreneurship. I remind myself of this very idea anytime I feel behind, and I'm saying that in air quotes, as if not figuring out what I wanted to do with life at some young age years ago has somehow put me quote unquote behind everyone else now. When that's totally not true at all. Instead, all of those random experiences are merging together to create the unique concoction and mixture of things that I can bring to the table that no one else has. And the same is true for you. How different your art must look now after a couple of decades of life and experience, rather than that first time you touched clay as a student, right? And I bet those decades make it better. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, I would so appreciate it if you subscribed and left a review on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Once you do leave a review, screenshot it and send it my way on Instagram at The Maker's Playbook so I can send you my thanks. The strangest part about this whole podcasting thing is how one-sided the microphone is. So truly, this extrovert over here really does love hearing from you. Like I said at the start, we won't have any new episodes over the next 2 weeks given the holidays, but if you want to be sure not to miss our kickoff to 2022, and there's some big things in store, then sign up for the newsletter by visiting makers-playbook.com/newsletter. I cannot wait for what is to come. Until next year, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality. Together, we've got this.